The world of the Transformers has many characters who have cemented themselves into pop culture. Whether that's your friendly neighborhood Autobot Bumblebee, or Optimus Prime, who might as well be the face that launched 1,000 ships. However, one of the most iconic characters comes from the Decepticon side. No, it's not Uncle Gun-Robo Megatron, it's his duplicitous, shrill-voiced perpetual second-in-command, Starscream.
You disgust me.
Starscream is a Year 1 character just like Optimus Prime and Megatron, and much like those two, he was killed off in the 1986 movie. However, despite being killed on his coronation night at the hands of Galvatron, Starscream returned from the grave, appearing in subsequent stories as a ghost.
Just the shadow of my former self, don't you think?
This is because, unlike most of the characters who died in the 1980s movie, Starscream's figure was not actually discontinued. In fact, it still went into 1986 and sold quite well. As the toy line marched on, we began seeing more and more gimmicks come through Transformers. This included Target Masters, Headmasters, and Power Masters, and with these new toys also came some legacy characters, most notably Power Master Optimus Prime, the new leader of the Autobots. In 1989, we saw classic Pretenders, which reintroduced Jazz, Bumblebee, and Grimlock, with one lone Decepticon. That's right, Starscream never stays down. Looking at 1989 Pretender Starscream, we can see that the Pretender shell already breaks from the conventions of the other Decepticon Pretenders. This is because Starscream is, well, a human. Most of the other Decepticon Pretenders are monsters of a variety. Skullgrin, for example, looks like he came straight out of a Dungeons & Dragons monster manual, and Octopunch, well, he's a deep-sea diver hiding a tentacle monster inside. Pretender Starscream is a lot less Sword and the Sorcerer, and a little more He-Man, mixing both science fiction and space fantasy together. This is most evident with the fact that even though Pretender Starscream looks like a Dread Knight, he has the F-15 Eagle wings sticking out of his back. This goes to another oddity of the Pretenders. Even though you'd think they'd fit in great with things like Masters of the Universe, Warlord, or Warrior Beasts, they're way too big. Measuring around about 8 inches or so, these guys tower over any other fantasy figure out there. But that's enough about this Galaxy Warrior facade. This is a Pretender, which means
first we crack the shell, then we crack the nuts inside!
Pretender's a little odd in the grand scheme of Transformers. Things like Power Masters, Headmasters, and Target Masters all feel like logical extensions of the toy line. All of these lines featured little minifigures which complemented the toy in some way, with direct interaction with Headmasters becoming, well, the head, as well as pilots for their alt modes, Target Masters becoming weapons, and Power Masters, adding fun accents. They don't really do a huge amount. But all of these are kind of reminiscent of Diaclone, with the Dionauts pairing well as pilots and accessories for the larger figures. Pretenders essentially come out of nowhere, the idea behind them being that there's a smaller figure hidden within a larger figure shell, a bit of an action figure nesting doll. These outer shells, though, are fairly inconsistent, with all of the Autobots being Space Marines that kind of look like He-Man toys, sort of, if you squint, whereas almost all of the Decepticons are monsters in some way, shape, or form. In the US and UK comics, Pretender technology was used essentially as a power boost, and sometimes as a way to go in disguise on alien planets. Though, the Decepticons are super conspicuous. Who knows, maybe Skeletor's filling in for Galvatron that day. Looking at Starscream's inner robot, we find this really cute and really tiny version of Starscream. Those colors are a little wonky, being primarily gray, blue, and black, which sounds like Starscream on paper, but doesn't look like him very much in execution. This color scheme was actually used one other time, and that's with the 1990s Action Master figure. So it's kind of weird that this stuck around for at least 2 toys. The figure has, well, much like any other G1 toy, no articulation. He can swing his arms up and down. That's about it. He doesn't have his null rays, instead the tail fins actually pop off to be little laser guns. All of this kind of highlights the biggest problem with Pretender Starscream's inner robot, and that's the fact that he's super shallow. I mean, yes, Starscream is super vain, but I mean, the sculpt, the paint, all the detail work, it's really bland. And that's partially because he has to be so thin and so compact that he can fit in the Pretender shell. His wings are even separate accessories because they can't fit inside the Pretender shell with them on. Looking at his vehicle mode, this F-15's a lot less of an Iron Eagle and a lot more of a Chicken Hawk. It's small and cute, much like the robot mode, but again, it really lacks that panache that really makes Starscream iconic. It's interesting how much of Starscream's character is sacrificed for the Pretender mode, and that all begs the question, who are Pretenders for anyway? You might think, well, He-Man, Masters of the Universe. It makes perfect sense, right? It's a sword and sorcery franchise full of muscular characters that was absolutely dominating toy shelves in the 80s. Except for the fact that Pretenders came out in 1988. By 1988, the Masters of the Universe movie from Canon came out and the series crashed and burned. Dungeons & Dragons? Well, no, LJN had already canceled that line, and any hopes for revival was killed with the Satanic Panic. How about another LJN toy line? Thundercats? Well, Thundercats wasn't doing so hot by 1987, 1988. And if you say Tiger Sharks, I guarantee nobody at Hasbro thought of Tiger Sharks. Instead, I think the impetus of Pretenders actually comes from Japan. By the time Pretenders were being developed by Hasbro and Takara, Japan was moving away from super robots and mecha, instead looking a lot more like the toy lines for Saint Seiya, as well as other shows like it, like Ronin Warriors, focus not only on the action figure, but dynamic armor, with a lot of the characters having magical girl-style transformations and armor-up sequences. In Japan, the Pretender Transformers were released in Super God Master Force. This interpretation of the Transformers is exclusive to Japan and includes characters who have, that's right, suit-up sequences and magical girl transformations, except in reverse, going from robot to human or robot to monster. Japan even had exclusive characters to this, including Metal Hawk. And looking at Starscream under this lens, he starts making a lot more sense. Pretender Starscream isn't here to hang out with his friend Skeletor and help him overthrow King Randor for Eternia's throne. Instead, Pretender Starscream looks way more at home in a shonen action manga. This makes him look way more like a villain from Saint Seiya, or even Fist of the North Star, compared to any other Transformer. This anime villain persona kind of makes Pretender Starscream a real interesting footnote in the character's history. It makes him a huge outlier, even compared to something like the Giant Dorito from the 2007 live-action movie. And it's an interesting addition to any collection.